Racist man slaps black kid mid-flight. Seconds later, a stranger stands up and changes everything. The sound of flesh meeting flesh cracks through the airplane cabin like lightning. A collective gasp ripples across rows 16 through 24 as 12-year-old Marcus Holloway's head snaps sideways from the impact. His chocolate brown eyes widen in shock, a red handprint already blooming across his left cheek. 2 rows behind, retired Marine Colonel Douglas Preston's weathered hands grip his armrest so tightly his knuckles turn white. The business class cabin freezes in that peculiar suspended animation that follows unexpected violence, a tableau of open mouths and horrified stares. "Keep your filthy hands off my seat, boy," Gerald Whittaker, a man in his 60s with thinning hair and an expensive watch, towers over Marcus, spittle flying from his lips as he jabs a finger toward the child. "Your kind need to learn some respect." Marcus's mother, Dr. Tamara Holloway, reaches across the aisle toward her son, her seatbelt still fastened, her face a mask of shock rapidly transforming into rage. The flight attendant at the front of the cabin is already moving toward them, but she's 3 rows away and caught behind the drink cart. That's when Colonel Preston unbuckles his seatbelt. The overhead bins seem to hold their breath. The engines hum beneath the tension. A baby cries somewhere in the back of the plane, the sound distant and unrelated to the storm brewing in business class. In the next 60 seconds, everything will change for everyone on United Airlines Flight 2317 from Chicago to San Francisco. But to understand how we got here to this moment of casual cruelty at 35,000 feet, we need to go back to the beginning of this journey. Not just to the boarding gate at O'Hare International Airport 3 hours ago, but to the invisible threads of history, circumstance, and choice that have drawn these strangers together in aluminum tube hurtling across the sky at 500 miles per hour. Dr. Tamara Holloway checks her watch for the 3rd time in 10 minutes as she and Marcus hurry through O'Hare's Terminal 1. Her heels click-clack against the polished floor, the sound swallowed by announcements and the general hum of airport chaos. At 42, Tamara carries herself with the confidence of someone who has spent a lifetime proving herself in rooms where she was often the only black woman present. Her crisp navy pantsuit and minimal gold jewelry speak of tasteful professionalism, while the natural curls framing her face add a touch of softness to her otherwise no-nonsense appearance. "Mom, slow down," Marcus pleads, struggling to keep pace while dragging his small carry-on behind him. Unlike his mother's purposeful stride, Marcus moves with the gangly uncertainty of early adolescence, all elbows and knees and feet that have suddenly grown 3 sizes in what feels like a month. "We can't slow down, baby. Our flight boards in 20 minutes and we still need to get through security." Tamara softens her voice despite the urgency. "The conference ran late and now we're cutting it close." What Tamara doesn't add is how much she hates cutting it close. How much she's had to be early, be prepared, be perfect in every professional setting just to be taken seriously. How much she's tried to instill that same sense of preparation in her son, not just as good life advice, but as armor in a world that will judge him more harshly than his peers. Marcus sighs dramatically in the way only preteens can. "I still don't see why I had to come to Chicago just to sit in a hotel room while you gave speeches." "We've been over this," Tamara replies, the patience in her voice practiced. "Grandma's knee surgery meant she couldn't watch you, and this keynote was too important to miss. Besides, we got to visit the Museum of Science and Industry yesterday, didn't we?" Before Marcus can respond, Tamara's phone rings. She juggles her carry-on and briefcase to fish it out of her pocket, glancing at the screen before answering. "Dr. Holloway speaking," she says, her voice shifting into what Marcus calls her doctor tone, authoritative yet approachable. As she listens to the caller, her expression tightens. "I understand the concerns, Dr. Peterson, but my research findings were peer-reviewed and quite clear. The disparities in pain management protocols can't be explained by—" She pauses, listening. "Yes, I'm aware that's a controversial conclusion, but the data." Marcus tunes out the conversation, his attention caught by a store window displaying the latest video game he's been begging for. By the time Tamara ends the call, her jaw is set in a way that tells Marcus she's upset but trying not to show it. "Everything okay, Mom?" he asks, suddenly concerned. Tamara's expression softens as she looks at her son. "Just some colleagues questioning my research findings. Nothing new." She reaches out to straighten the collar of his polo shirt. "Come on, we really need to hurry now." Across the terminal, Gerald Whittaker checks his Rolex and scowls at the boarding pass in his hand. First class to San Francisco, seat 3A. It should feel like a victory, another successful business trip, another deal closed, but all he feels is the familiar burning in his chest that his doctor has warned him about. Stress, they say, hypertension. Words that seem to appear more frequently in his medical chart with each passing year. At 64, Gerald has the polished look of old money, though the truth is far more complicated. His tailored suit and monogrammed cufflinks don't reveal the factory worker father or the mother who cleaned other people's houses. They don't show the scholarships that got him through college or the decades of clawing his way up through investment banking. His carefully cultivated exterior reveals nothing of the fear that drives him, the persistent terror that someone will discover he doesn't belong in the world he's fought so hard to join. "Another drink, sir?" The bartender at the airport lounge interrupts his thoughts. Gerald glances at his empty Scotch glass, considers his burning stomach, and nods anyway. "Make it a double." As the bartender turns to pour, Gerald's phone buzzes with an incoming text from his daughter. "Dad, please call before your flight. We need to talk about Mom's care options." He stares at the message, then puts the phone face down on the bar without responding. His wife's advancing dementia has become a topic he avoids with the same determination he once applied to scaling the corporate ladder. Acknowledgement feels too much like acceptance, and Gerald Whittaker has never accepted defeat in his life. The bartender returns with his scotch. "Heading somewhere nice, sir." "San Francisco," Gerald replies curtly, not inviting further conversation. "Business or pleasure?" Gerald takes a sip of his drink, feeling the familiar burn. "Business is pleasure when you're good at it." 3 gates down, Colonel Douglas Preston sits with perfect posture despite the uncomfortable airport chairs, reading a dog-eared paperback, Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. At 72, his military bearing remains evident in his straight back and measured movements. His hair has gone completely white, cropped close to his scalp in the same style he's worn for 50 years, and deep lines map his face like topographical evidence of a life lived intensely. Beside him sits his wife of 48 years, Eleanor, her silver hair twisted into an elegant knot at the nape of her neck. While Douglas reads, Eleanor's knitting needles click rhythmically as she works on what appears to be a baby blanket in soft yellow yarn. "Do you think Emily will like this color?" Eleanor asks, holding up her work. "I know they didn't want to know the baby's gender, but yellow seems safe, doesn't it?" Douglas looks up from his book, his stern expression immediately softening as he regards his wife. "It's perfect, Ellie. Our granddaughter has your taste. She'll love anything you make." Eleanor smiles, pleased with his response. "I can't believe we're going to be great-grandparents. Makes me feel ancient." "Speak for yourself," Douglas replies with a rare chuckle. "I'm in my prime." Eleanor's laugh lines deepen as she reaches over to pat his knee affectionately. They sit in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind that comes only after decades together. "I've been thinking," Eleanor says finally, her needles never stopping their rhythm. "After we visit Emily and help with the baby, maybe we should extend our trip, drive up the coast, see the redwoods. When was the last time we took a real vacation?" Douglas hesitates, his thumb marking his place in his book. "The department's short-staffed, Ellie. I only got 2 weeks approved. The community college will survive without their history professor for an extra week, Doug." Eleanor's voice is gentle but firm. "You retired from the Marines 15 years ago. You don't need to treat the community college like it's your command." Before Douglas can respond, the gate agent announces pre-boarding for their flight to San Francisco. Douglas stands, offering his hand to Eleanor with old-fashioned courtesy. As they gather their belongings, neither notices the mother and son rushing toward the same gate, nor the distinguished businessman approaching from the opposite direction, all 3 parties destined to collide in ways none could anticipate. If you're caught up in this story unfolding at Chicago O'Hare, stay with us to see what happens when these lives intersect at 35,000 feet. This journey is just beginning. The boarding process for United Airlines Flight 2317 proceeds with the organized chaos typical of modern air travel. First class and premier status passengers are called first, and Gerald Whittaker strides forward, boarding pass and ID in hand, his movements precise despite the 2 double scotches warming his blood. He nods curtly at the gate agent's rehearsed welcome and enters the jetway with the confidence of someone who has done this hundreds of times. Douglas and Eleanor Preston board next, Douglas insisting on carrying both their bags despite Eleanor's protests. "I've got it, Ellie," he says quietly. "Save your strength for spoiling our great-grandchild." When their group is finally called, Tamara Holloway exhales with relief. "See, we made it," she tells Marcus, ruffling his short curls affectionately. "Now remember, it's a full flight, so best behavior, okay? No kicking the seat in front of you even if you get restless." "Mom," Marcus rolls his eyes. I'm not 5. Just a reminder, Tamara says with a smile, though they both know it's more than that. It's one of dozens of extra instructions black parents give their children, the additional rulebook for moving through a world where innocent behaviors might be interpreted differently depending on who's doing them. On board, Gerald settles into his first-class seat with practiced efficiency, immediately donning the complimentary sleep mask and declining the flight attendant's offer of a pre-departure beverage. His head already throbs with the beginning of what promises to be a spectacular hangover, and all he wants is silence and darkness until they reach San Francisco. The Prestons find their seats in the second row of business class, Douglas insisting Alina take the window seat so she can watch the world get smaller as they ascend, a ritual they've maintained since their first flight together in 1976. When Tamara and Marcus reach their assigned seats in business class, a rare upgrade Tamara splurged on with miles to make up for dragging her son to a medical conference, they discover they're not seated together as requested. I'm sorry about this, the flight attendant says, checking her tablet. The flight's completely full. You're in 17C, Dr. Holloway, and your son is across the aisle in 17D, Tamara frowns. We specifically requested seats together when I booked 3 months ago. I understand, and I apologize for the inconvenience. Let me see if anyone might be willing to switch once everyone's boarded. The flight attendant's expression is sympathetic but harried as more passengers push past them in the narrow aisle. Tamara hesitates, weighing whether this is worth pushing back on, aware of the passengers stacking up behind them. That's fine, thank you, she finally says, gesturing for Marcus to take the aisle seat across from her. As they stow their carry-ons and settle in, she gives Marcus a reassuring smile. It's just for a few hours and we're right across from each other. Marcus nods, already pulling out his handheld gaming device. It's cool, Mom. I'm not a baby. The boarding process continues around them, the cabin gradually filling with the diverse tapestry of humanity that constitutes any commercial flight. Business travelers tapping away on laptops until the last possible moment. Families with young children attempting to settle energetic toddlers. Elderly couples moving with careful deliberation. Solo travelers already donning headphones to signal their disinterest in conversation. As the final passengers board, Tamara notices an older white man approaching, checking seat numbers with evident irritation. With a sinking feeling, she realizes he's headed for the seat directly in front of Marcus 17. B. Gerald Whittaker had been dozing fitfully in his first-class cocoon when a flight attendant gently roused him. Mr. Whittaker, I'm very sorry to disturb you, but we have a situation that requires your assistance. Groggily removing his sleep mask, Gerald squints up at her. What kind of situation? There's been a mechanical issue with one of the first-class seats, a problem with the reclining mechanism that maintenance can't quickly fix. We need to reseat one first-class passenger, and as you're traveling alone, we were hoping you might be willing to accept a seat in business class. We would, of course, refund the difference in fare and offer you additional compensation for the inconvenience. Gerald's immediate instinct is to refuse. He paid for first class precisely to avoid being packed in with the masses. But the flight attendant's expression is pleading, and despite his general misanthropy, Gerald has always had a weakness for attractive women asking for his help. Plus, his throbbing head makes the prospect of arguing unappealing. Fine, he sighs, gathering his belongings, but I expect appropriate compensation. Of course, sir. Thank you for your understanding, if you'll follow me. And that's how Gerald Whittaker finds himself standing in the business class cabin, staring at seat 17B, directly in front of a black child who appears to be about 12 years old, already immersed in some electronic game. Gerald stows his carry-on and takes his seat without acknowledging anyone around him, immediately reclining his seat to the maximum allowable position and closing his eyes, hoping to recapture the sleep that had been interrupted. Behind him, Marcus frowns as his space is suddenly reduced by the reclining seat, but remembering his mother's constant coaching about not drawing attention to himself in public spaces, he simply adjusts his position and continues playing his game, his sneakered feet planted firmly on the floor. As the flight attendants perform their final checks, and the captain announces an on-time departure, no one in the business class cabin has any inkling that they're about to become participants in a drama that will change each of them in ways both subtle and profound. The first hint of trouble comes about 45 minutes into the flight, after the seatbelt sign has been turned off and the drink service has begun. Marcus, having grown bored with his game, has shifted positions several times, each movement slightly jostling the seat in front of him. Gerald, whose headache has intensified with altitude and whose attempt to sleep has been largely unsuccessful, feels each tiny vibration like a personal assault. After a particularly noticeable movement, Gerald turns around, his face already flushed with irritation. "Could you possibly keep still?" he asks, his tone making the question sound nothing like a request. Startled, Marcus looks up from his device. "Sorry, sir," he says automatically, the polite response his mother has drilled into him. Tamara, who has been reviewing conference notes on her tablet, immediately looks up at the exchange. She catches Marcus's eye and gives him a small nod of approval for his handling of the situation, then returns to her work, though her attention remains partially on the interaction. Gerald turns back around, muttering something under his breath that neither Marcus nor Tamara can quite catch. The cabin settles back into the white noise of engines and quiet conversations. 10 minutes later, as the drink cart approaches their row, Marcus shifts again, this time accidentally nudging the back of Gerald's seat as he reaches for something in his backpack under the seat in front of him. The reaction is immediate and disproportionate. Gerald whips around, his face contorted with anger. "I asked you to stop kicking my seat, boy." His voice carries beyond their immediate vicinity, causing several nearby passengers to look up. "I wasn't kicking, I was just getting something from my bag," Marcus responds, his voice small but defensive. "I barely touched it. Don't talk back to me," Gerald snaps, his volume increasing. "Where's your parent? Someone needs to teach you some manners." Tamara unbuckles her seatbelt and leans across the aisle. "I'm his mother," she says, her voice calm but steely. "And my son said he was getting something from his bag, which he's entitled to do. He apologized the first time, though frankly, these seats are close together, and some contact is unavoidable." Gerald's gaze flicks to Tamara, taking in her professional appearance and confident demeanor with visible surprise, as though he hadn't expected Marcus's mother to be so formidable. "Well, he needs to be more careful," Gerald says, his tone slightly moderated but still dismissive. "Some of us are trying to rest, and some of us are trying to exist in the space we paid for," Tamara replies evenly. "My son is being perfectly reasonable. Perhaps you might consider that the minor disturbances of air travel are a shared experience we all endure." Gerald's face darkens at what he perceives as a challenge. "I paid for first class and got downgraded to this. The least I should expect is not to be constantly disturbed." "That sounds like an issue between you and the airline," Tamara says, "not something my 12-year-old son should bear the brunt of." From 2 rows behind, Douglas Preston watches the exchange with growing concern, his military instincts alerting him to escalating tension. Beside him, Eleanor places a restraining hand on his arm, correctly reading his intention to intervene. "Let them sort it out, Doug," she whispers. "Not every situation needs a commanding officer." Douglas settles back reluctantly, though his posture remains alert as the flight attendant arrives with the drink cart, temporarily diffusing the situation. "What can I get you folks to drink?" the attendant asks with professional cheerfulness, either oblivious to or choosing to ignore the tension. "Scotch," Gerald says curtly. "Double, no ice." "Apple juice, please," Marcus requests politely. "Just water for me, thank you," Tamara adds. As the flight attendant prepares their drinks, an uneasy peace descends over row 17. Gerald faces forward again, his shoulders rigid with unresolved anger. Tamara exchanges a look with Marcus that says more than words, a look that carries the weight of countless similar situations they've navigated together, a look that says, "I see you. I've got you. We'll get through this like we always do." What no one realizes is that this minor altercation is merely the prelude to a confrontation that will force everyone on this flight to examine their own beliefs, prejudices, and capacity for both cruelty and compassion. As the plane continues its journey westward, invisible pressure builds in the cabin, not just the regulated air pressure that keeps everyone breathing normally at 35,000 feet, but the social pressure of unacknowledged bias, historical wounds, and the complex dynamics of power and privilege about to collide in row 17. If you're finding this story of tension at 35,000 feet compelling, make sure you're subscribed to see how this situation unfolds. Sometimes the most important moments in life happen in the most unexpected places, like the middle seat of a crowded airplane. The next 30 minutes pass in relative calm. Gerald nurses his scotch and keeps his seat upright, perhaps as a silent concession. Marcus returns to his game, taking extra care not to move unnecessarily. Tamara alternates between reviewing her notes and casting protective glances at her son, her work focus broken by the lingering tension in the air. Douglas Preston has not relaxed his vigilance, despite Alina's gentle attempts to draw him into conversation about their great-grandchild-to-be. Something about the earlier interaction has triggered his protective instincts honed through 3 tours in Vietnam and countless peacekeeping missions afterward. At 72, he's seen enough of human behavior to recognize when a situation is merely dormant rather than resolved. The trouble resurfaces when turbulence hits. Not severe enough for the captain to illuminate the seatbelt sign, but significant enough to cause the plane to drop suddenly before stabilizing. The unexpected motion sends Marcus's unattended cup of apple juice toppling, the contents splashing onto the floor and, unfortunately, splattering the back of Gerald's seat and the sleeve of his expensive suit jacket. What the Gerald jumps up as much as the cabin ceiling allows, twisting to examine the damage. His face contorts when he sees the amber liquid staining his cuff. "Are you serious right now?" "I'm sorry," Marcus exclaims, genuinely distressed. "The plane bumped and first you kicked my seat and now this?" Gerald's voice rises, drawing attention from throughout the business-class cabin. "This is a $1,000 suit." Tamara immediately unbuckles her seatbelt and stands. "It was an accident caused by turbulence," she says firmly. "My son apologized. We can help you clean it up." She reaches for the cocktail napkins on her tray, but Gerald waves her off with a dismissive gesture that borders on contemptuous. "Don't bother," he sneers. "You've done enough." The flight attendant approaches quickly, napkins already in hand. "Sir, please return to your seat. I can help with your jacket." Gerald ignores her, his attention fixed on Marcus, who has shrunk back in his seat, eyes wide with apprehension. "Do you have any idea what things cost in the real world, boy? Or do you just take whatever handouts come your way and still complain it's not enough?" The cabin goes quiet at this thinly veiled comment, the background hum of conversation evaporating as passengers register the escalation and its uncomfortable subtext. "Excuse me?" Tamara's voice cuts through the silence, sharp as a scalpel. "What exactly are you implying about my son?" Gerald turns his glare to her. "I'm not implying anything, I'm stating a fact. Some people have no respect for other people's property because they've never had to work for anything themselves." "You know nothing about me or my son," Tamara replies, her professional composure cracking slightly to reveal the anger beneath. "I'm a board-certified cardiologist who just delivered a keynote address at a medical conference. My son is in the gifted program at his school. Not that any of that should matter. Basic human decency shouldn't depend on our credentials." Gerald scoffs. "Right. Affirmative action at work, I'm sure." A collective intake of breath ripples through the nearby rows as the confrontation crosses into undeniably racist territory. The flight attendant steps closer, her expression now concerned. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to return to your seat and lower your voice." "I will when this kid learns to keep his hands to himself and his drinks on his tray," Gerald retorts, still standing, still looming over Marcus's seat. It happens so quickly that later, witnesses will give conflicting accounts of the exact sequence. Marcus, distressed and seeking to defuse the situation, reaches out a hand in a placating gesture, perhaps to offer more napkins, perhaps simply an instinctive response to the tension. His fingers barely brush the sleeve of Gerald's jacket. And then there's the sound, that sharp crack of palm against cheek that cuts through the cabin like a thunderclap. Marcus's head snaps sideways from the impact. Tamara's scream of "Don't you touch my son" collides with the flight attendant's "Shocked, sir," and the collective gasps of nearby passengers. In the frozen moment that follows, as a red handprint blooms on Marcus's brown cheek and tears of shock well in his eyes, Gerald Whittaker stands trembling with rage and something else, perhaps a dawning horror at his own actions. "Keep your filthy hands off my seat, boy," he spits, though his voice has lost some of its conviction. "Your kind need to learn some respect." That's when Colonel Douglas Preston unbuckles his seatbelt. The overhead bins seem to hold their breath. The engines hum beneath the tension. A baby cries somewhere in the back of the plane, the sound distant and unrelated to the storm brewing in business class. Douglas rises to his full height, no longer the towering presence of his younger military days, but still imposing in his quiet dignity. He moves with deliberate calm into the aisle, placing himself between Gerald and the Holloways. "That's enough," he says, his voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "You've assaulted a child. Sit down before you make this worse for yourself." Gerald, still running on adrenaline and alcohol, puffs up his chest. "This doesn't concern you, old man. Mind your own business." Douglas doesn't flinch. "When a grown man strikes a child in my presence, he makes it my business." His tone remains even, almost conversational, but something in his steady gaze causes Gerald to take an involuntary step back. I suggest you return to your seat, now. For a tense moment, it seems Gerald might escalate further. Then from behind Douglas, Alina's voice emerges, gentle but clear. Gerald Whittaker, isn't it? I believe we met at the Hansons' charity gala last spring. Alina Preston. She has also risen and moved into the aisle, her silver hair and elegant appearance a stark contrast to the ugliness of the moment. My husband is right. This situation has gone far enough. Why don't you let the flight attendant help with your jacket, and we can all return to our seats? The unexpected social connection, the implication that he is known, that his behavior will have consequences beyond this flight, seems to penetrate Gerald's anger where direct confrontation couldn't. His posture deflates slightly. The lead flight attendant arrives, having been summoned by her colleague. What's happening here? She asks, though the tear-streaked face of a child and the tense standoff tell much of the story. This man struck my son, Tamara says, her arm now protectively around Marcus's shoulders. I want him moved away from us immediately, and I intend to press charges when we land. He provoked me, Gerald begins, but the excuse sounds hollow even to his own ears. I saw everything, Douglas interjects calmly. The boy did nothing to provoke physical assault. Multiple witnesses can confirm that. Around them, several passengers nod in agreement. Someone from a few rows back calls out, "We all saw it. The man hit the kid for no reason." The lead flight attendant's expression hardens as she assesses the situation. Sir, I need you to gather your belongings and come with me to the front of the aircraft. Captain's orders. You can't be serious, Gerald protests, but his bluster is fading rapidly as the reality of his actions and their potential consequences begins to sink in. I'm very serious, the flight attendant replies. Either you come with me voluntarily or the captain will declare an emergency and divert this flight to the nearest airport where law enforcement will be waiting. Your choice. Gerald looks around, finding no allies among the sea of disapproving faces. With stiff movements, he collects his items from the seat pocket and his small carry-on from the overhead bin. As he moves to follow the flight attendant, he pauses beside Marcus, who instinctively shrinks back against his mother. The cabin holds its collective breath, wondering if another outburst is imminent. Instead, something complicated passes across Gerald's face, a flicker of shame, perhaps, or the first cracks in a lifetime of entrenched prejudice confronted by its own ugly manifestation. He begins, then stops, seemingly unable to form the words that might begin to address what he's done. Move along, sir, the flight attendant prompts firmly. As Gerald is escorted toward the front of the plane, Douglas turns his attention to Marcus and Tamara. Are you all right, son? He asks Marcus, his voice gentling considerably from the tone he used with Gerald. Marcus nods shakily, his hand still pressed to his cheek. Yes, sir. You handled yourself with remarkable dignity, Douglas tells him. That takes real courage. Tamara, still vibrating with protective rage and the aftermath of adrenaline, manages a grateful nod to Douglas. Thank you for stepping in. No thanks necessary, Douglas replies. Some things are simply right or wrong. This was wrong. Alina has produced a small travel first aid kit from her purse and offers it to Tamara. There's a cold pack in here that might help with the swelling, she says. And perhaps some pain reliever. As Tamara accepts the kit with murmured thanks, the surrounding passengers begin to respond. A woman across the aisle offers Marcus her untouched bottle of water. A businessman a row ahead turns to express his outrage at Gerald's behavior and his admiration for Marcus's composure. From further back, someone passes forward a chocolate bar with a note that simply reads, "You're a champ, kid." These small gestures of human kindness, mundane in any other context, take on profound significance in the aftermath of such naked hostility. They represent a collective repudiation of what Gerald's actions stood for and an affirmation of a different set of values. As the commotion settles and people return to their seats, Douglas pauses before returning to his own. If you need anything at all, my wife and I are right back there, he tells Tamara, indicating their seats. Don't hesitate to ask. I appreciate that, Tamara replies. Then after a moment's hesitation, I'm Dr. Tamara Holloway. This is my son, Marcus. Colonel Douglas Preston, retired, and my wife, Alina. The formal introduction feels like the establishment of an alliance, small but significant. As Douglas and Alina return to their seats, and Tamara helps Marcus apply the cold pack to his cheek, no one realizes that this is just the beginning of their connection, that the threads of their lives have become irrevocably intertwined in ways that will continue to unfold long after Flight 2317 touches down in San Francisco. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below to join our community of storytellers and listeners as we continue this journey together. The remainder of the flight takes on a strange, heightened quality, the shared intensity of the incident creating invisible bonds among the passengers who witnessed it. The business class cabin, normally a space of polite disinterest where travelers maintain careful bubbles of privacy, has been transformed by collective witness and response. 30 minutes after Gerald is relocated to a seat in the far back of economy class, as far from Marcus as possible while still on the same aircraft, the lead flight attendant returns to speak privately with Tamara. "Dr. Holloway," she begins, her voice low, "I want to personally apologize for what happened to your son. This is completely unacceptable, and I assure you the airline takes incidents like this very seriously." Tamara nods, her professional mask back in place though her eyes still flash with controlled anger. "I appreciate that. Has the captain contacted law enforcement to meet the flight?" "Yes, San Francisco police will be waiting when we land. They'll want statements from both of you and from witnesses." The flight attendant hesitates. "The man, Mr. Whitaker, has asked if he could apologize to your son." Tamara's expression hardens. "Absolutely not. He's done enough damage for one day." "I completely understand. He won't approach you again." The flight attendant pauses, then adds, "We've upgraded both of your tickets to first class for your return journey, and the airline will be reaching out about additional compensation. It's the least we can do." After she leaves, Marcus turns to his mother. "Mom, do we really have to talk to the police?" Tamara studies her son's face, the red mark on his cheek already darkening to what will likely be a bruise by tomorrow. Her heart aches at the uncertainty in his eyes, but her resolve is firm. "Yes, baby, we do," she says gently. "What that man did was assault. It was wrong, and there need to be consequences." Marcus looks down at his hands. "It's going to be a whole thing, isn't it, with police reports and maybe court and stuff?" Tamara recognizes the real question beneath his words. Will this define me? Will this become the story that follows me? She spent Marcus's entire life trying to protect him from becoming another statistic, another black child marked by trauma, and now this happens at 35,000 feet where she couldn't shield him. "It might be," she acknowledges, "but we'll face it together, and remember all those people who stood up for you. That's part of the story too." From the row behind them, Douglas Preston has been pretending not to overhear their conversation. Now he leans forward slightly. "Pardon the intrusion," he says, "but if you'd like a witness statement, my wife and I would be more than happy to provide one. I have some experience with these matters." Tamara turns, surprised and touched by the offer. "That would be very helpful, thank you." "It would be our privilege," Alina adds, her knitting needles still moving steadily despite the earlier excitement. "That man's behavior was unconscionable." This exchange is interrupted by turbulence more significant this time, enough for the captain to illuminate the seatbelt sign and request that flight attendants take their seats. The plane drops suddenly, then rocks side to side before stabilizing. Nervous laughter ripples through the cabin, that peculiar response to shared anxiety that seems unique to air travel. As the turbulence subsides, Douglas finds himself reflecting on the parallels between physical and social instability, how quickly the veneer of civilization can be stripped away by unexpected jolts, revealing what lies beneath. In his 72 years, he's witnessed humanity at its worst and its best, often in the same moment. Today's incident is just another data point in his long study of human nature, yet it feels significant in ways he can't quite articulate. Alina, who has known her husband long enough to read his silences, places a hand on his arm. "You're thinking about Robert, aren't you?" she asks quietly. Douglas nods, memories of their son surfacing unbidden. Robert at 12, the same age as Marcus, coming home with a split lip after being jumped by older boys who objected to his friendship with a black classmate. Robert at 18, shipping out to the Middle East despite his father's misgivings, determined to serve his country as Douglas had. Robert at 23, returning home in a flag-draped coffin after his convoy hit an IED outside Fallujah. "He would have done the same thing," Douglas says, his voice rough with emotion rarely displayed. "Probably with less restraint than I showed." Alina squeezes his arm. "He would have been proud of you today." 2 rows ahead, unaware of the emotional currents flowing behind them, Marcus has fallen into an exhausted sleep, his head resting against his mother's shoulder. Tamara gently brushes his hair back from his forehead, studying the young face that still holds traces of the baby he once was, while already showing hints of the man he will become. She thinks about the medical conference she's just left, her presentation on racial disparities in cardiac care, the subtle skepticism from some colleagues, the enthusiastic support from others. The data is clear. Black patients receive different treatment for the same symptoms, leading to poorer outcomes. What's less clear is how to change a system built on centuries of bias, both conscious and unconscious. Today's incident feels like a microcosm of that larger struggle: blatant racism, confronted and condemned, yes, but only after harm has already been done. The stranger standing up changed the outcome, but couldn't erase the initial injury. Just as her research might improve future cardiac care, but can't restore those already lost to systemic inequities. Progress, Tamara thinks wearily, always comes with a price. And too often, that price is paid by the most vulnerable. At the front of the aircraft, in a jump seat outside the cockpit, Gerald Whittaker sits in isolated misery, the magnitude of his actions finally penetrating the haze of alcohol and anger that had propelled them. His $1,000 suit now seems like a ridiculous costume, his carefully constructed identity as a successful businessman crumbling in the face of what he's revealed himself to be: a man who would strike a child over spilled apple juice. The realization brings not just shame, but fear. There will be police waiting in San Francisco. There may be charges. The incident will likely make the news. Businessman assaults child on flight is too sensational a headline to ignore. His clients will see it. His country club associates will see it. His daughter, already struggling with her mother's care, will see it. Gerald closes his eyes, wishing fervently that he could turn back time by just a few hours, decline that last scotch at the airport bar, accept his first-class downgrade with better grace, respond to the accident with annoyance rather than rage. But time moves only forward, at approximately 500 miles per hour in this case, carrying him inexorably toward the consequences of actions that can never be undone. As the plane begins its initial descent into San Francisco International Airport, these four individuals, Tamara and Marcus Holloway, Douglas and Alina Preston, and Gerald Whittaker, remain unaware of how their lives will continue to intersect in the days and weeks to come. They don't yet know about the viral video captured by a passenger 8 rows back, already uploading to social media as the plane begins its approach. They don't know about the newspaper reporter on her way home from assignment who is composing the first draft of an article in her head. They don't know about the community responses, the legal proceedings, or the unexpected alliance that will form between a black cardiologist, a retired Marine colonel, and most surprisingly, a disgraced investment banker seeking redemption. For now, they are simply fellow travelers, descending through clouds toward solid ground, each carrying the imprint of an encounter that has changed them in ways both visible and invisible. If you've been moved by this story of confrontation and connection at 35,000 feet, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. In our next segment, we'll follow these characters as they land in San Francisco and face the immediate aftermath of this mid-air incident. The most powerful moments often come after the initial conflict, when people must choose how to move forward from hurt and harm. The descent into San Francisco International Airport offers spectacular views of the Bay Area, the Golden Gate Bridge emerging from wisps of fog, the cityscape rising and falling with the famous hills, Alcatraz Island standing sentinel in the bay. But few passengers on Flight 2317 are admiring the scenery. An undercurrent of anticipation runs through the business-class cabin as people exchange glances and whispered conversations, wondering what will happen when they land. Marcus has awakened from his brief nap, the side of his face still marked by Gerald's handprint, though the worst of the redness has faded. He seems subdued but composed as he helps his mother gather their belongings in preparation for landing. "How are you feeling?" Tamara asks, studying her son's face with the dual assessment of a mother and a physician. "I'm okay," Marcus replies, then adds with unexpected thoughtfulness, "I feel bad for him in a way." Tamara's eyebrows rise in surprise. "For the man who hit you?" Marcus nods, struggling to articulate his complex emotions. "He seemed sad, under all the anger, like something else was really bothering him and I just happened to be there." Tamara regards her son with a mixture of pride and concern. At 12, he's already developing the emotional intelligence to see beyond behavior to its potential, causes a quality that will serve him well in life, but might also leave him vulnerable to making excuses for those who harm him. "That's very insightful and probably true," she acknowledges. "Many people who lash out are dealing with their own pain. But Marcus, listen to me. Understanding someone's pain never means you have to accept their harmful behavior." His feelings might explain his actions, but they don't excuse them. Marcus absorbs this, then asks, "Are you still going to press charges?" "Yes," Tamara says firmly. "Consequences are how we learn and how society establishes boundaries. He needs to face those consequences, regardless of what was going on inside him when he acted." Behind them, Douglas Preston has overheard this exchange and finds himself impressed by both the boy's compassion and the mother's clarity. Too often, he's observed people swing to extremes, either dismissing harmful behavior with understanding or demanding punishment without considering context. The balance this mother is teaching her son reflects a wisdom Douglas has only achieved after decades of life experience. As the plane touches down with a slight bounce and the engine's reverse thrust with a roar, Elena leans toward her husband. "I've been thinking," she says. "We should invite them to dinner." Douglas raises an eyebrow. "Dr. Holloway and her son?" Elena nods. "They're facing a stressful situation in an unfamiliar city. The least we can do is offer some friendly faces and a good meal." Douglas considers this. Typically, he's not one for spontaneous social invitations, preferring the company of long-established friends and family. But something about this situation, and perhaps something about Marcus that reminds him of his own son at that age, makes the idea appealing. "All right," he agrees. "But let's wait until after they've dealt with the police. They might just want to get to their hotel and put this whole mess behind them." The aircraft taxis to the gate with agonizing slowness, as though the plane itself is reluctant to reach its destination and discharge its passengers into the uncertain aftermath that awaits. When they finally reach the jetway and the seatbelt sign is turned off, no one makes the usual mad dash to stand in the aisle. Instead, there's an unusual courtesy as people remain seated, allowing Tamara and Marcus to gather their belongings without being crowded. The lead flight attendant approaches them as they prepare to disembark. "Dr. Holloway, there are 2 police officers waiting at the gate to take your statement. They've asked to speak with you first before other passengers leave the aircraft." Tamara nods, placing a protective hand on Marcus's shoulder. "We're ready." As they move toward the exit, several passengers offer words of support. "Stay strong, young man," says an elderly woman in the front row of business class. "You handled yourself beautifully," adds a middle-aged businessman. A flight attendant discreetly presses a handful of first-class snacks into Marcus's hand with a conspiratorial wink. These small gestures of solidarity continue as they make their way up the jetway, where 2 San Francisco police officers are waiting, their expressions professional but not unkind. "Dr. Holloway, I'm Officer Chen, and this is Officer Rodriguez," the female officer introduces herself. "We understand there was an incident on your flight involving your son." "Yes," Tamara confirms. "A passenger struck my child across the face following a minor disagreement about seating space and a spilled drink." Officer Rodriguez crouches slightly to address Marcus at eye level. "Hey there, that must have been pretty scary. How are you doing?" Marcus straightens his shoulders, clearly making an effort to appear composed. "I'm okay, sir. It doesn't hurt much anymore." Officer Chen nods approvingly. "You're being very brave. We're going to need to ask you some questions about what happened, but first, would you like to sit down somewhere quieter?" They're escorted to a small conference room near the gate, where Tamara and Marcus provide their account of the incident. Douglas and Elena Preston are brought in next as witnesses, followed by several other passengers and flight crew members. Gerald Whittaker is kept separate from the others, interviewed in another location within the terminal. As the statements are being taken, the first news alerts begin to appear on passengers' phones. The video, captured by a college student several rows behind the Holloways, has already been uploaded to multiple social media platforms and is gaining traction rapidly. The caption reads, "Racist man SLAPS black kid on flight for accidentally spilling drink. Watch what happens next. United Flight 2317 racism stand-up table is." Within the first hour, the video has been viewed over 50,000 times. By the time Tamara and Marcus complete their police statements, that number has quadrupled. Neither of them is aware of this yet, focused as they are on the immediate process of documenting what occurred. When they finally emerge from the conference room, exhausted by the emotional toll of reliving the incident, they find Douglas and Elena Preston waiting for them in the terminal. "We wanted to make sure you were all right," Elena explains, "and to ask if you might consider joining us for dinner this evening. We know a lovely restaurant not far from Union Square that's quiet enough for actual conversation." Tamara hesitates, surprised by the invitation and unsure if she and Marcus have the energy for social interaction after such an ordeal. Sensing her uncertainty, Douglas adds, "No pressure, of course, But sometimes after difficult experiences, it helps to be around friendly faces rather than alone in a hotel room, and we'd be honored by your company. Marcus looks up at his mother with hopeful eyes, and Tamara realizes that perhaps what they both need is precisely this, a reminder of human kindness to balance the day's ugliness. That would be lovely, she accepts. Thank you. As they exchange contact information and make arrangements to meet later, none of them notices the solitary figure being escorted through a different exit by airport security Gerald Whittaker, released with a citation and a court date. His face ashen as he glances at his vibrating phone and sees the first of many messages from his daughter. Dad, what have you done? It's all over the internet. Before you see how this ends, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any part of this unfolding story. The most important moments often happen after the cameras stop rolling and the social media attention fades. Mooley's Bistro near Union Square has been a San Francisco institution since 1982. Its warm lighting, dark wood paneling, and secluded booths make it perfect for conversations that require both comfort and privacy. Douglas and Alina Preston have been coming here for years during their visits to the city, long enough that Morris, the maitre d', greets them by name and leads them to their booth in the back corner without being asked. Your guests haven't arrived yet, Colonel, Morris informs them as he holds Alina's chair. Can I bring you your usual while you wait? Please, Douglas nods. And we'll need menus when they arrive, a woman and her 12-year-old son. Morris raises an eyebrow slightly. The Prestons have never brought children here before, but his professional demeanor never wavers. Of course, I'll have Jimmy prepare a children's menu just in case. As Morris departs, Alina reaches across the table to take her husband's hand. You've been quiet since we left the airport. What's on your mind? Douglas considers deflecting the question, his default response to inquiries about his inner thoughts. But after nearly 50 years of marriage, he knows Alina sees through such evasions. I keep thinking about what Tamara said to her son on the plane, about understanding someone's pain not being the same as excusing their behavior. Alina waits, knowing there's more. I've spent decades teaching military history, Douglas continues. Trying to help students understand the forces that drive conflict, economic pressures, ideological differences, resource competition, understanding the why behind warfare. But I've always been clear that explanation isn't justification. And that's bothering you? Douglas sighs. I wonder if I've applied that same principle consistently in my personal life, particularly regarding my father. Alina's expression softens. Her husband rarely speaks of his father, a decorated World War II veteran who returned home with undiagnosed PTSD and a drinking problem that made family life unpredictable at best, terrifying at worst. You were 12 when he came back from the Pacific, she says gently. Just like Marcus is 12 now. Douglas nods, the parallel not lost on him. Watching that man strike Marcus today, it brought back memories I thought I'd put to rest long ago. Before Alina can respond, Morris appears at the table. Colonel, Mrs. Preston, your guests have arrived. Tamara and Marcus follow the maitre d' to the table, both looking more relaxed than they had at the airport, though still carrying the subtle tension of people who have experienced trauma. Marcus has changed from his travel clothes into a fresh polo shirt and khakis, his mother in a simple but elegant blue dress. The mark on his cheek has faded to a faint shadow, visible only if one knows to look for it. I hope we haven't kept you waiting, Tamara says as Douglas stands to greet them. Not at all, Alina assures her. We were just enjoying a moment of quiet after all the excitement. As they settle into their seats, Douglas notices how Marcus's eyes widen appreciatively at the restaurant's old-world charm, the vintage aviation photographs on the walls, the model biplanes hanging from the ceiling, the soft jazz playing in the background. This place is cool, Marcus says, then quickly glances at his mother as if checking whether this observation is appropriate for the setting. It is indeed, Douglas agrees. The owner was a pilot in World War II. Started this place with his navigator after they came home. Those are their planes in the photographs. Marcus looks at the nearest photo with renewed interest. Did you fight in that war too? Marcus, Tamara admonishes gently, that's a personal question. It's quite all right, Douglas assures her. No, young man, I'm not quite that vintage. I served in Vietnam, a different war, a different time. My dad says Vietnam was a mistake, Marcus says, his directness the unfiltered honesty of pre-adolescence. Was it? A brief, uncomfortable silence falls over the table. Tamara looks mortified, but Douglas merely considers the question with the seriousness it deserves. Your father isn't wrong, he says finally. Many mistakes were made by politicians, by military leaders, by our society as a whole. But the individual men and women who served there were just trying to do their duty as they understood it. History is complicated that way, rarely all right or all wrong. Marcus absorbs this, then asks, "Is that why you became a history teacher, to explain the complicated stuff?" Douglas finds himself smiling. The boy is perceptive. That's exactly why. Understanding the past helps us make better choices in the present. At least that's the hope. The arrival of menus provides a natural transition away from weighty topics. As they consider their options, Alina engages Tamara in conversation about her medical practice and research, while Douglas draws Marcus out about his interests in school and hobbies. By the time their appetizers arrive, the initial awkwardness has dissolved into the comfortable rhythm of people genuinely interested in learning about each other. It's over the main course prime rib for Douglas, salmon for Alina, pasta for Tamara, and a gourmet cheeseburger for Marcus that the conversation inevitably returns to the day's events. "I received a call from the airline's customer relations department just before we came to dinner," Tamara mentions. "Apparently the video of the incident has gone viral. They're concerned about potential PR damage and are eager to make things right, whatever that means." "Video?" Alina asks, surprised. "Someone recorded what happened," Tamara nods. "A college student several rows behind us. The police officers mentioned it during our interview, but I haven't seen it myself. I'm not sure I want to." "Smart," Douglas comments. "Nothing to be gained by watching yourself be traumatized." "Have they told you what's happening with the man?" Alina asks delicately, avoiding saying Gerald's name. "He's been issued a citation for simple assault and has a court date next month," Tamara replies. "Since we'll be back in Boston by then, our statements will be submitted in writing unless the case goes to trial, which is unlikely for a first offense." "Will you have to come back if there is a trial?" Douglas asks. Tamara's expression hardens slightly. "Absolutely. I want Marcus to see that actions have consequences and that the system can work to protect people who have been wronged." She pauses. "Or at least I want him to see me fighting for that principle, even if the system ultimately disappoints." Her qualification hangs in the air, an acknowledgement of the reality that justice is not always served equally or fairly, a truth that Douglas, with his military background, and Alina, with her decades of community advocacy work, understand all too well. Marcus, who has been quietly eating his burger during this exchange, suddenly speaks up. "Mom says it's important to show up even when it's hard," he says. "Like how she goes to all my science fairs even when she has important doctor stuff." The simple observation breaks the tension, drawing smiles from the adults. "Your mother is very wise," Alina tells him. "Showing up is half the battle in most of life's important moments." As their plates are cleared and dessert menus presented, Douglas makes a decision. "I'd like to offer our home to you both should you need to return for court proceedings. We live in Marin County, just across the Golden Gate Bridge, much more pleasant than a hotel and no expense." Tamara looks startled by the generous offer. "That's incredibly kind, but we couldn't impose." "It's not an imposition," Alina interjects smoothly. "Our house is too big for just the two of us anyway. We built it when our children were young, expecting grandchildren to fill the extra rooms." Instead, they all settled on the East Coast. "Besides," Douglas adds, "I'd like to see this through. What happened today matters beyond just one incident on one flight. It speaks to who we are as a society, what we tolerate and what we stand against." There's something in his tone, a moral certainty untainted by self-righteousness, that resonates with Tamara. She recognizes in this older white man something she didn't expect to find, a genuine ally who understands that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. "Thank you," she says simply. "We may take you up on that." As they finish their desserts, chocolate mousse for the adults and an elaborate ice cream sundae for Marcus, their conversation drifts to lighter topics. Alina's knitting projects, Marcus's fascination with marine biology, Tamara's love of jazz, Douglas's collection of historical maps. They discover shared interests and complementary differences, the foundations of friendship being laid over coffee and dessert. When they finally leave the restaurant, the night air carries the distinctive chill of San Francisco even in summer. Douglas flags down a taxi for Tamara and Marcus, insisting on paying for their ride back to the hotel despite Tamara's protests. "It's been a pleasure getting to know you both," Alina says as they prepare to part ways. "Despite the unfortunate circumstances. Sometimes the best connections come from the most unexpected places," Tamara responds, surprising herself with the sentiment. After years of careful professional detachment, a survival mechanism in the often unwelcoming world of elite medicine, she finds herself genuinely drawn to this older couple. Marcus, fighting a yawn after the long, emotionally draining day, still remembers his manners. "Thank you for dinner, Colonel Preston, Mrs. Preston, and for, standing up for me on the plane." "You can call us Douglas and a leaner young man," Douglas tells him, briefly resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "And no thanks necessary. It was the right thing to do." As the taxi pulls away, carrying Tamara and Marcus back to their hotel, Eleanor slips her arm through her husband's. "You're going to follow this case, aren't you, even after they go home to Boston?" It's not really a question. After nearly 5 decades together, she knows how her husband's mind works, his inability to leave loose ends untied, his deep-seated need to see justice served. "Yes," Douglas admits, "but there's something else, too." "That boy reminds me of someone." "Robert," Eleanor says softly. Douglas nods. "He has the same thoughtful way of looking at the world, the same courage without bravado." Eleanor squeezes his arm gently. "Then we'll definitely be seeing more of them." As they walk toward their own waiting car, neither of them is aware that across the city, in a much less pleasant hotel room, Gerald Whittaker sits alone, staring at his phone as the video of his worst moment continues to accumulate views, shares, and increasingly vitriolic comments. By morning, his name will be identified in social media posts. By afternoon, his employer will issue a statement investigating the incident. By evening, his daughter will arrive in San Francisco, not to support him, but to ask how he could have done something so terrible. The ripples from Flight 2317 are just beginning to spread, touching lives in ways no one can yet predict. The story of what happened on that flight isn't just about a moment of racism confronted, but about the complicated aftermath, how people choose to respond to harm, to witness, to shame, and ultimately to the possibility of redemption. Because sometimes the true measure of a society isn't in preventing all moments of failure, but in how we collectively respond when those failures occur. Would you have stood up like Colonel Preston, offered comfort like Eleanor, or would you have remained silent, a passive witness to injustice? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for the next part of this unfolding story. 3 days after the incident on Flight 2317, Tamara and Marcus Holloway are preparing to return to Boston. Their hotel room is strewn with the organized chaos of packing suitcases open on the beds, toiletries gathered on the bathroom counter, Marcus's souvenirs from Pier 39 carefully wrapped in t-shirts for the journey home. Despite the traumatic start to their San Francisco stay, mother and son have managed to salvage some enjoyment from the trip. They've ridden cable cars up the steep hills, toured Alcatraz Island, eaten sourdough bread bowls filled with clam chowder at Fisherman's Wharf, and spent a full day at the California Academy of Sciences in Golden Gate Park. Throughout these excursions, they've been periodically recognized by strangers who have seen the video, an unexpected consequence that Tamara has handled with practiced grace, and that Marcus has found alternately embarrassing and interesting. "Mom," Marcus asks as he struggles to fit a large plush sea otter into his already overstuffed backpack. "Do you think people will still recognize us when we get home?" Tamara pauses in her own packing, considering the question. "Probably not as much. The internet moves quickly. By next week, there will be new videos, new stories capturing people's attention." "Good," Marcus says decisively. "I'm tired of being that kid from the plane." "I understand," Tamara replies, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It's strange having a private moment become public property, isn't it?" Marcus nods, abandoning his packing efforts to join his mother. "Yeah, and people keep saying I was brave, but I didn't do anything brave. I just sat there." Tamara pulls him into a side hug. "Sometimes maintaining your dignity in the face of cruelty is its own kind of bravery. You didn't lash out, you didn't sink to his level." "That takes strength." "I guess," Marcus says, unconvinced. After a moment he asks, "Do you think that man is sorry for what he did?" The question catches Tamara off guard. She's been so focused on protecting Marcus, on ensuring legal consequences, on processing her own anger and fear, that she hasn't given much thought to Gerald Whittaker's potential remorse. Her instinct is to dismiss the possibility, to categorize him simply as a racist who showed his true colors. But she remembers Marcus's observation on the plane about the sadness beneath the man's anger. "I don't know," she answers honestly. "People are complicated. He might be sorry he's facing consequences, or sorry he was caught on video without actually being sorry for the harm he caused, or he might be genuinely remorseful. We may never know." "Colonel Douglas says people can change if they really want to," Marcus offers. He told me about some of his students who started his class with really wrong ideas about history, but ended up understanding better by the end. Tamara smiles at her son's use of their new friend's full title. Colonel Douglas has apparently made quite an impression. He's right that people can change, but real change requires acknowledging the harm you've caused, making amends where possible, and committing to do better. It's not just saying sorry. Their conversation is interrupted by Tamara's phone ringing. Checking the screen, she's surprised to see the name of her department chair at Boston Memorial Hospital. "Dr. Chen, is everything all right?" she answers, immediately concerned about being called on a Sunday by her supervisor. "Tamara, yes, everything's fine at the hospital," Dr. Chen reassures her. "I'm actually calling about this situation you're in. The video from your flight has made its way through medical circles, and I just wanted to check on you and your son personally." "That's very kind," Tamara says, genuinely touched by the gesture. "We're doing well, all things considered, coming home tomorrow." Good, listen, there's something else." Dr. Chen's tone shifts slightly. "Several of our colleagues have seen the video and well, they're angry on your behalf. There's talk of organizing some kind of response, a statement from the cardiology department condemning racism in healthcare and beyond. Would you be comfortable with that?" Tamara feels a complex mix of emotions at this proposition. On one hand, she's moved by her colleagues' support. On the other, she's wary of having her personal trauma become a departmental cause célèbre. "I appreciate the sentiment," she says carefully, "but I'd prefer to discuss this when I return. This incident involved my son, and I'm trying to be thoughtful about how we process it." Of course, Dr. Chen backpedals slightly. "We'll table any official response until you're back. Just know that you have the department's full support." After ending the call, Tamara sits quietly for a moment, processing. Marcus, who has returned to his packing struggles, glances over. "Hospital stuff?" he asks. "Sort of," Tamara replies. "People at work have seen the video too." Marcus considers this. "Is that bad?" "Not bad, just complicated," Tamara sighs. "Remember how we talked about being that kid from the plane? Well, I don't want to be that doctor from the plane either. I've worked hard to be recognized for my research and clinical skills, not for being the victim of a racist incident." Marcus abandons his sea otter and comes to sit beside his mother again. With wisdom beyond his years, he takes her hand. "You're still Dr. Holloway, the heart doctor who saves lives and gives boring speeches at conferences," he tells her solemnly, though a teasing glint enters his eye at the word boring. Tamara laughs, her tension broken by her son's perfect blend of earnestness and cheek. "You're right, thank you for the perspective check." She ruffles his hair. "And my speeches are not boring, they're informative." "If you say so," Marcus grins, ducking away from her hand. "Can we get pizza for dinner?" "Last night in San Francisco and all." "Pizza it is," Tamara agrees, grateful for her son's resilience and his ability to focus on the present moment rather than dwelling on past hurts or future uncertainties. Across the city, in a considerably more upscale hotel suite, Gerald Whittaker sits across from his daughter, Catherine. At 38, Catherine bears a striking resemblance to her father in her facial features, though her expression carries none of his habitual sternness. Her blonde hair is pulled back in a practical ponytail, her simple linen dress and minimal jewelry reflecting a tasteful but understated style quite different from her father's ostentatious displays of wealth. "The lawyer thinks you should issue a public apology," Catherine says, consulting her notes from their earlier meeting with the attorney Gerald hastily retained after the incident. "It won't make the charges go away, but it might help with public perception." Gerald scoffs, swirling the sparkling water in his glass, his first non-alcoholic beverage in longer than he cares to admit. "Public perception? My career is over, Catherine. Sanderson and Beck put me on administrative leave after 40 years of making them millions. The club is reviewing my membership status. My so-called friends aren't returning my calls. What good is an apology going to do?" Catherine studies her father, noting the slump in his shoulders that wasn't there the last time she saw him, the new lines around his mouth, the way his hand trembles slightly as he sets down his glass. For the first time in her memory, he looks old and afraid. "This isn't about salvaging your career, Dad," she says gently. "It's about doing what's right. You hit a child. Whether you meant to or not, whether you were under stress or not, that happened. Don't you think you owe him an apology?" Gerald turns to look out the window where San Francisco Bay glitters in the afternoon sun. "Of course I owe him an apology," he says quietly. "Him and his mother, but that's not what these vultures want. They want public self-flagellation, tears, and beating of breast so they can feel superior while they cancel me." Catherine sighs. Her father has always had a gift for recasting himself as the victim, even when he's clearly in the wrong. It's a trait that made him successful in business, always finding a way to reframe situations to his advantage, but has made personal relationships challenging. This isn't about vultures or cancellation, she counters. It's about a 12-year-old boy you struck in a moment of rage. Whatever the consequences to your reputation or career, they're the result of your actions, not some conspiracy to bring you down. Gerald turns from the window, a flash of his old anger surfacing. You too. I expected more loyalty from my own daughter. Loyalty doesn't mean blind support for wrongdoing, Catherine replies, her voice steady despite the familiar tension between them. I flew out here because you're my father and you're in trouble, but that doesn't mean I approve of what you did. A heavy silence falls between them, weighted with decades of complicated history. Catherine has always been the one person willing to stand up to Gerald, a quality he both resents and secretly admires. It's why, despite their frequent clashes, she remains the family member he turns to in crisis. Your mother would be so disappointed in me, Gerald finally says, his voice barely audible. The mention of Helen Whittaker, dead 3 years now after a long battle with dementia, catches Catherine by surprise. Her father rarely speaks of her mother, having withdrawn emotionally long before her physical decline began. She would, Catherine agrees, seeing no point in false comfort. But she would also want you to make amends as best you can. Gerald nods slowly, a decision forming. I want to apologize to them directly, not some sanitized statement drafted by a PR firm, not some video apology posted online for likes and shares. Face to face. Catherine's surprise shows. I'm not sure that's possible, Dad. They're probably heading home soon, and even if they're still here, they might not want to see you. Then I'll go to Boston, Gerald says with sudden determination. I'll apologize to them on their home turf, where they feel safe and in control. No press, no audience. Just a man acknowledging his grievous error to those he harmed. Catherine studies her father, trying to discern if this is genuine remorse or another strategic move to minimize damage. To her surprise, she sees something in his eyes she hasn't witnessed since she was a child: vulnerability, and what appears to be sincere regret. I'll help you try to arrange it, she says cautiously. But you need to be prepared for them to say no. They don't owe you the opportunity to apologize. I know, Gerald acknowledges, a new humility in his tone. But I owe them the attempt. As the sun begins to set over San Francisco, casting long golden light across the bay, these two families, the Holloways and the Whittakers, prepare for their respective journeys home, unaware that their paths are destined to cross again. The incident that brought them together in conflict has set in motion currents that will continue to draw them into each other's orbits, challenging assumptions, opening wounds, and perhaps, eventually, offering pathways to healing that none of them can yet imagine. In Marin County, Douglas and Alina Preston are hosting a small dinner party for friends, other retired professors and their spouses, a local author, a former military colleague now working for a veterans advocacy group. As Alina serves coffee and her famous apple tart in the living room with its sweeping views of Mount Tamalpais, the conversation inevitably turns to the incident on Flight 2317. I still can't believe you were there, says Marion, a retired linguistics professor who's been friends with Alina since their teaching days at UC Berkeley. The video is everywhere. My granddaughter showed it to me on TikTok, of all places. Douglas, typically reserved about personal matters, finds himself sharing the experience with unexpected openness. The boy showed remarkable composure, he tells the group. And his mother, Dr. Holloway, she's quite extraordinary, board-certified cardiologist, researcher focusing on racial disparities in cardiac care. Brilliant woman. You sound impressed, observes Richard, Douglas's former military colleague, with a knowing smile. I am, Douglas admits. They both handled an ugly situation with dignity. We had dinner with them afterward, delightful company. Alina, returning from the kitchen with a fresh pot of coffee, adds, We've invited them to stay with us if they need to return for court proceedings. That poor child shouldn't have to relive the experience in some impersonal hotel. Their friends exchange glances. The Prestons rarely invite virtual strangers into their home, despite their general hospitality. Something about this situation and these particular people has clearly struck a chord. Later, after their guests have departed and Alina is loading the dishwasher, Douglas receives a text message from Tamara. Wanted to let you know we're flying home tomorrow. Thank you again for your kindness. Marcus keeps talking about the cool old soldier who stood up for him. You've made quite an impression. Douglas smiles at the message, then shows it to Alina, who reads it with a warm chuckle. From Colonel Preston to cool old soldier, I'd say that's a promotion. Indeed, Douglas agrees. I've been called many things in my life, but cool is a new one. Elinor studies her husband's face, noting the subtle change in his demeanor since the incident on the plane. There's a lightness to him she hasn't seen in some time, as though standing up for Marcus somehow helped heal an old wound within himself. You should invite them for a proper visit, she suggests. Not just if they have to return for court. Boston isn't that far. Douglas considers this. Perhaps let's see how things develop. He pauses, then adds, I've been thinking about the man who hit Marcus Whitaker. I wonder what happens to someone like that after. Elinor tilts her head questioningly. After what? After they've shown the worst of themselves so publicly, Douglas clarifies. After they've crossed a line they probably never imagined crossing. Does a moment like that become a permanent mark of shame, or can it be a turning point toward something better? It's a historian's question, philosophical and measured, considering the arc of a human life and the potential for change. But it's also a deeply personal question, one that reflects Douglas's own complex relationship with anger and its consequences. I suppose that depends on what he does next, Elinor replies thoughtfully. Whether he tries to justify or deflect, or whether he honestly confronts what led him to that moment. She pauses, then adds, People can change, Douglas, you did. The simple statement hangs in the air between them, acknowledging a truth they rarely discuss directly, how the angry young man who returned from Vietnam had, through conscious effort and Elinor's steadfast support, become the measured, thoughtful person he is today. It wasn't easy, Douglas says quietly. The important things rarely are, Elinor responds, reaching for his hand. As night falls over the Bay Area, these three households, the Holloways preparing for their journey home, the Whitakers grappling with the consequences of a moment's loss of control, and the Prestons reflecting on the nature of change and redemption, remain connected by the invisible threads of a shared experience that has altered each of them in ways still unfolding. The story that began at 35,000 feet continues on the ground, moving beyond the viral video and social media outrage to the more complex territory of human vulnerability, accountability, and the possibility of growth even from our most shameful moments. Because sometimes the most important parts of our stories happen after the cameras stop rolling, in the quiet spaces where real change, painful, difficult, and transformative becomes possible. 2 weeks after returning to Boston, Marcus Holloway sits in the waiting area outside his mother's office at Boston Memorial Hospital, homework spread across his lap as he waits for her to finish with her last patient of the day. It's their new routine 3 afternoons a week. He comes to the hospital after school instead of going to their empty apartment. The change isn't explicitly discussed, but both mother and son find comfort in being closer to each other since the incident on the plane. Marcus glances up as the office door opens and his mother emerges with an elderly patient, her professional smile warming into something more genuine when she spots her son. She completes her conversation with the patient, scheduling a follow-up appointment and offering final instructions about medication before turning her full attention to Marcus. Productive afternoon? She asks, nodding toward his open textbooks. Almost done with math, Marcus reports. Just one more problem set for science. Well, you can finish at home, Tamara says, checking her watch. I promised to pick up dinner from that Thai place you like, remember? As they gather Marcus's books and Tamara's work materials, her administrative assistant appears in the doorway, looking slightly uncomfortable. Dr. Holloway, there's someone here asking to see you. I told him you don't take walk-ins, but he's been waiting for over an hour and insists it's important. Tamara sighs, already anticipating another medical colleague wanting to discuss the incident, under the guise of professional concern. Despite her department chair's assurances, she's found herself becoming something of a reluctant symbol since returning to work, approached by other doctors of color sharing similar experiences, invited to speak on panels about racism in healthcare, even contacted by a medical journal about writing an opinion piece. Who is it? She asks, keeping her frustration from her voice. The assistant hesitates. He says his name is Gerald Whitaker. The name hits like a physical blow. Tamara instinctively steps closer to Marcus, who has frozen in place, his textbook halfway into his backpack. The man from the plane? Marcus asks quietly, his voice smaller than usual. Tamara nods, her mind racing through possible responses. Her first instinct is to refuse the meeting, to protect Marcus from further trauma, to shield herself from whatever self-serving apology or justification this man might offer. But something in her son's expression gives her pause. What do you think? she asks Marcus, honoring his agency in a situation that directly affected him. Do you want to see him? Marcus considers the question with the serious thoughtfulness that continues to impress his mother. Maybe, he says finally, if you're there too. And if we can leave if it gets weird. Absolutely, Tamara assures him. We can end the conversation anytime. She turns to her assistant. Please show Mr. Whitaker to my office, and then you can head home for the day. We'll lock up. As the assistant leaves to fetch their unexpected visitor, Tamara and Marcus exchange a look of mutual support and resolve. They've discussed the incident frequently since returning home, processing their feelings together with the help of Marcus's regular therapist, who added several sessions to address the trauma. They've prepared for various scenarios, media attention, legal proceedings, school reactions, but neither had anticipated a direct confrontation with Gerald Whitaker himself. When the door opens again, Gerald enters alone, stopping just inside the threshold as if unsure of his welcome. The man who stands before them is markedly different from the arrogant, angry figure from the plane. His expensive suit has been replaced by more casual slacks and a button-down shirt, his posture less commanding, his expression hesitant rather than entitled. Dr. Holloway, he begins, his voice rougher than they remember. Marcus, thank you for seeing me. I know you have every reason to refuse. Tamara remains standing, maintaining a physical position between this man and her son. Why are you here, Mr. Whitaker? Gerald takes a deep breath, clearly having rehearsed this moment. I came to apologize in person. What I did was inexcusable, harmful, traumatic, and deeply wrong. There's no justification for hitting a child ever under any circumstances, and the racist nature of my words and actions compounded that harm. He pauses, seeming to struggle with emotion. I am profoundly sorry for the pain I caused both of you. The office falls silent as Tamara assesses the apology. It contains the right elements, acknowledgement of harm, no excuses, recognition of the racist component, but she remains wary of its sincerity. You came all the way to Boston to say this? She asks, neither accepting nor rejecting the apology yet. Gerald nods. Yes, I didn't want to do this through lawyers or prepared statements. You deserve to hear it directly from me, face to face, on your terms, and... He hesitates. I understand if you don't accept my apology. I'm not asking for forgiveness or for the charges to be dropped. I'm here because it was the right thing to do, regardless of the outcome. Marcus, who has been watching this exchange intently, suddenly speaks up. Are you sorry because you got in trouble or because you know what you did was wrong? The directness of the question clearly catches Gerald off guard, but after a moment, he responds with equal directness. Both, if I'm being honest. At first, I was just sorry about the consequences, the video going viral, losing my job, the public shame. But in the past 2 weeks, I've had to really look at myself and what led me to that moment. And now I'm genuinely sorry for the act itself, for hurting you, for the fear and pain I caused, for the hateful things I said. There's a rawness to his answer that sounds authentic, even to Tamara's skeptical ear. She glances at Marcus, trying to gauge his reaction. My dad died when I was 7, Marcus says, the apparent non sequitur surprising both adults. Mom says he had a lot of anger inside him too, but he was working on it, going to therapy and stuff. Gerald blinks, clearly not expecting this turn in the conversation. I'm sorry about your father, he says quietly. Marcus nods, then continues. Mom says sometimes people get so used to being angry that they forget how to be anything else. Is that what happened to you on the plane? Question asked without accusation but with genuine curiosity seems to pierce something in Gerald. He sinks into one of the visitor chairs, suddenly looking every one of his 64 years. I think that's very insightful, he says after a moment. Anger has been my default response for a long time, to stress, to fear, to feeling out of control. It's been a shield I've hidden behind, but that's not an excuse, he adds quickly. Just a recognition of a pattern I'm now trying to change. Tamara, moved despite herself by this exchange, finally takes a seat as well, indicating that Marcus should do the same. What specifically are you doing to change? She asks, her tone still guarded but less confrontational. I'm in therapy twice a week, Gerald replies. I've enrolled in an anger management program. I'm working with a diversity consultant who specializes in addressing unconscious bias. And I've started volunteering at a community center in a predominantly black neighborhood in Chicago, not for show or to earn points, but to step outside my isolated bubble and engage with people I've spent most of my life avoiding or dismissing. The comprehensiveness of this response suggests a level of reflection Tamara hadn't expected. Still, years of navigating white guilt and performative allyship have made her cautious. Those sound like positive steps, she acknowledges. But real change takes time and consistent effort. It's not a checklist to complete and move on from. I understand that, Gerald says earnestly. This is just the beginning of what I hope will be a fundamental shift in how I move through the world. I don't expect a gold star for basic human decency or for trying to unlearn harmful patterns. I'm 64 years old, it's long overdue. Marcus, who has been listening intently, asks, "What happened after the plane? Were people mean to you because of the video?" Gerald considers how to answer this question appropriately, aware that he needs to be honest without seeking sympathy. There were consequences, yes. Many people were angry, and rightfully so. I lost my job, some friends stopped speaking to me, and there were some very difficult conversations with my daughter. But those consequences are the result of my actions, not something that happened to me. Tamara notes this distinction with grudging approval. Suggests a level of accountability she hadn't initially thought him capable of. "Mr. Whitaker," she says finally, "I appreciate you coming here and apologizing in person. That took courage. I can't speak for Marcus, but personally, I'm not ready to offer forgiveness. What happened affected us deeply and continues to impact our sense of safety and trust." Gerald nods in acceptance. "I understand completely. As I said, I didn't come seeking forgiveness or to make myself feel better. I came because you deserved a direct acknowledgement of the harm I caused." He rises to leave, seeming to sense that the conversation has reached its natural conclusion. At the door, he pauses and turns back. "There's one more thing. My lawyer advised against this, but it feels right." He reaches into his pocket and withdraws an envelope which he places on the edge of Tamara's desk. "This is a certified check for $50,000 made out to any charitable organization of your choosing. It's not compensation for what happened, no amount of money could be, but rather a concrete commitment to making some kind of positive impact come from this situation. You can tear it up if you prefer or direct it wherever you think it might do the most good." With that, he nods respectfully to both of them and exits, closing the door quietly behind him. For a long moment, mother and son sit in silence, processing the unexpected encounter. Finally, Marcus speaks. "I think he meant it," he says simply, "about being sorry." Tamara studies her son's face, marveling at his capacity for discernment. "I think you might be right," she agrees. "What are you feeling right now?" Marcus considers the question. "Weird," he admits, "but maybe a little better, like it doesn't fix what happened, but it helps to know he's trying to do better." "That's a very mature perspective," Tamara tells him, once again proud of her son's emotional intelligence. Marcus shrugs, suddenly self-conscious about the praise. "So what are we going to do with the money?" he asks, nodding toward the envelope still sitting untouched on the desk. Tamara hasn't even looked at it yet, part of her still wary of accepting anything from Gerald Whitaker. But her son's practical question cuts through her hesitation. "What do you think we should do with it?" she asks him. Marcus doesn't hesitate. "We should give it to a program that helps kids who have been bullied or experienced racism. So something good comes out of what happened, like he said." Tamara feels a surge of love and pride so intense it momentarily overwhelms her. How did she raise such a compassionate, thoughtful human being? In the midst of his own trauma, he's thinking about helping others who have experienced similar harm. "That," she says, her voice thick with emotion, "is an excellent idea." As they finally leave the office, heading toward their favorite Thai restaurant for the dinner they've earned after this emotionally demanding encounter, neither of them notices the text message arriving on Tamara's phone from an unknown number. "Tamara, it's Douglas Preston. Elena and I will be in Boston next month for a wedding. Would love to see you and Marcus if you're available. Hope you're both well." The connections formed in that moment of crisis at 35,000 feet continue to develop, creating a web of relationships that none of them could have anticipated. Each person changed in subtle but significant ways by an encounter that began with hatred but has opened unexpected doors to growth, understanding, and perhaps, eventually, healing. Would you have stood up like Colonel Preston, offered comfort like a leaner, or remained silent, hoping the tension would pass? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure you're subscribed to see how this story of confrontation and redemption continues to unfold.